Even as violence persists in Manipur, Union Home Minister Amit Shah has been in the state to assess the situation on the ground. The Home Minister's outreach in Manipur has yielded assurances of a CBI probe, establishment of a peace committee and compensation of rupees 10 lakh to the families of the victims of violence. In this special telecast, we would like to reflect varied voices of the state of Manipur, hear from them on how they feel and what they feel about the month-long violence that has marred their state and how do they view the outreach by the Union Home Minister Amit Shah at a critical time to bring about ceasefire between the Meiteis and the Kukis in Manipur. Let's hear from the people of Manipur who do and what to do and they feel is going to be and bringing about sustained peace and harmony in this state. Joining us on the show to talk about this sensitive issue is Professor Amar Yumnam, former Vice Chancellor, Manipur University. Kham Khanswan, HOD, Political Science University of Hyderabad, also with us on the program. Timothy Chongdu, former President of the Kuki Student Organization, also joins us on the program. And last but not the least, Rajat Sethi, former advisor to Manipur Chief Minister, also joins us on the show for this very important conversation. Professor Yumnam, if I can begin with you, and if you can hear me, sir. Can you hear me, sir?
Yeah, I do.
Well, the Home Minister, has more or less tried to resolve or try to bring about some semblance into what's going on in Manipur. A lot of us, in the other parts of the country have been extremely shocked at the longevity of this problem. We have been shocked as to the volatility and the sensitivity that still persists. We have seen images, we have seen the violence, and we empathize with the people who've been displaced. And of course, our hearts go out to the people who've been killed in this unnecessary violence. The big question that everybody in India is asking today, we have peace today, there are sporadic incidents coming up, but the fact of the matter is this problem over? Does this come up again? And if so, is there a sustainability approach that the government can perhaps, look and, basically implement so that something like this does not transpire again?
Well, for us also, we have never seen such kind of a thing happening in Manipur during the last personal age. I'm going to be 70 years. Well, we have never seen something like this. But the Home Minister has proposed that a judicial commission is going to be constituted to inquire into. Well, that is fine. But beyond that, we should see whatever the initiative Home Minister has given should be the beginning of a long-term strategy to bring about shared process of development for the entire Manipur. Well, not just cookies. What is much more important is that, well, knowing the causes of the recent crisis, well, that is fine. We'll try to see to it that those things never repeat. But beyond that, we need to see to it that, well, what exactly is the composition of the cookies, what is their settlement pattern, how to make them settle permanently like the other communities, and how to, because Kukis, among the various ethnic groups in Manipur, Kukis are the ones who have come up with new aspirations. And very aspiring. Kukis are very aspirant today, new aspirations, and we need to give direction to this and not wasted that kind of energy on fighting like this, on violence events or indulgence in violence. That is one. Now, the question is how to give direction to this newfound aspiration, the social strength of the Kukis towards a longer term development of their society as well as the Manipur as a whole. That's one. And number two, what is much more important for us is that, well, Honorable Home Minister has talked about helicopter and all that. Well, I'm not much interested in that kind of a thing in the sense that in any crisis like this, it's the common people who pay the price, who really bear the cost of such events. So what is much more important now is that how can we see to it that, well, here also definitely I have been making this proposal, constitute a committee of experts, not just one person, two person, committee of 4 or 5 to bring about a kind of a development model, to work out a kind of development model, because besides the air link or helicopter service, what is much more important in the mountain areas of Manipur, number one, the inter-village linkages should be, well, improved. And the linkages of the villages with the district headquarters should be improved. And the inter-district linkages should be improved, such that the people find it easier to participate in the development process. So that is where we can bring the interaction of the common people among various ethnic groups enhanced. What is important is enhance the interaction, not separation. You are in one location, one group, another one is in another location without much interaction. We have to remove that. Interaction is the only long-term solution to this kind of a crisis. So what is important is we must have a committee for that also, which will work out for a long-term shared development of Manipur, and while at the same time solving the community constitution issue which others are talking about of the cookies. And that is very important. That is very important. That is how we can forget about Naga issue, cookie issue, Muslim issue, things like that. What we need to work out is this. And besides, the Judicial Commission, I hope, will work out on was there any lapse on the part of governance also. That is also one issue. Well, I'll start with this.
Okay, those are good points. Mr. Khan Housing, are you there with us, sir? Mr. Housing?
I'm there. You can call me Swan. Yeah.
Yeah, Swan, appreciate you speaking with us. Important point brought out by Professor Yumnam that, were there any glitches and loopholes in the governance that have led to this? And is this something which can be plugged in a very short period of time?
I wish that the Godi talks that Professor Yumnam, lay out before you works at this point. I'm afraid that we have crossed the Rubicon, and the applying adhesive to a ball which is already ruptured might not work, because in the past scholars like us, including me, have highlighted the glaring disparities between the hills and the valleys in terms of infrastructure, in terms of representation, because the whole reservation system has not worked, because it has been manipulated, distorted, and used in such a way that there is no seriousness on the part of the political establishment to bridge all those glaring disparities, right? And if you look at some of the figures, it would be very clear and glaring before your eyes. For example, if you look at some of the 23 odd institutions of eminence established in Manipur, you'll find that only 2 are in the hill areas, right? Or look at, for example, according to the reservation policy of the state, which follows 31% reservation for scheduled tribe, you hardly have any department which in effect cross the halfway mark. And the kind of manipulation is so deep-seated, and there is no seriousness whatsoever to bridge these divide. And you now have agreed, not only to be satisfied with the kind of manipulation that the majoritarian community have, but also to directly grab, land in the hill areas. And if you look at closely, the kind of transformation of this conflict today, you'll find that the conflict has transformed so much so that it has been so lethal in terms of its nature as well as consequences, which further deepen what I initially characterized this as an institutionalized riot system. And I'll tell you that this become increasingly apparent if you look at the kind of military postings of various, whether it is the Assam Rifles or whether it is the IRB or BSF. In effect, 22 odd high-rank military officers who belong to the majority community are posted now in different strategic locations in Manipur. Not a single Kuki Zog are posted in areas which are sensitive to offensive strike by the state force. Remember that these are old, premeditated, organized target against the hill communities. Until today, if you see, despite all these falsehood and propaganda loans from the Chief Minister's office, if you closely scrutinize actually existing realities from the foothills, you'll find that most of these escalations of violence are in effect launched by the state force in connivance with hordes of radicalized militants. They are indiscreet now. We do not exactly know who are responsible in that. Remember that out of the 7 proscribed terrorist organizations in the state, 7 belong to the valley areas, and none of these are willing to sign any suspension of operation with the Indian government. And you have this hell let loose now, in fact, used by the state in ways that is really, really disturbing. And there are also sporadic reports of some of these high-ranking military officers, directly aiding, for example, in mortar firings, in the use of illuminate lighting, as well as firing up of the villages. In fact, there are now, tapped communication which are available in the public places. So this is really, really disturbing. And until and unless this institutionalized riot system stop forthwith, I do not see any possible talk of peace at this juncture. I think, given that they are hard in position both from the valley areas as well as on the hill areas, and until and unless this nonsense stop forthwith, I do not see any possibility of peace emerging for now.
Okay, all right. You've painted a grim picture there. Mr. Timothy, if you're there with us.
Yeah, hi.
Well, the agreement in 2008 has been instrumental in terms of the peace that we've seen in Manipur. But nevertheless, there are parts of the Kuki National Organization which also bear arms. There is an element of precariousness that the government needs to address this issue with. Do you think what we have heard from the Home Minister and the kind of charter he's produced to bring about peace in Manipur is going to be enough?
Well, Dr. Kamkan Swan had already highlighted all the very important points which needs to be highlighted. But yes, as you have mentioned regarding these Sioux groups, there are Sioux groups which have signed with the government, and the government have all the list and all the data is available with them, whether they have been involved in this conflict or not. And the CDS, who is the Chief of Defense Staff, have also made it clear that this is not an insurgency issue. And secondly, when we talked about the peace prevailing, in order to bring peace in the state, on the one hand, you strip off the DGP, who is from the Kuki-Zo community, and there are other senior officers also, much higher in ranking than the present ADGP who is posted in Manipur as of now. And on the other hand, you have more than 22 paramilitaries and the Assam Rifles who are, in a very good ranking, and they are posted in the hilly areas or in the Manipur state, controlling the crowd. So these kind of, on the one hand, you strip off the Kuki-Zo community officers. On the other hand, you post the majority Meitei community in these areas which are, in conflict zones. So the trust factor is a little bit deficient out here, because there are evidence also which has been out in the media or in the YouTube channels or in the social media, where you have a conversation between the commandant and other these radical groups like the Meitei Lupun and Arangbai Tiengol. So if the collusion is proved, then the safety of the villages is a big question. So in order to bring peace and normalcy, I think a neutral party has to be posted in such conflict zones so that the trust deficit is not there in the minds of the people.
Okay. Rajat Sethi?
Yes.
Well, there's also excessive security forces and a build-up in the state. This is obviously in response to the violence that we have seen in Manipur. Do you think that this is also indicative of some sort of a larger game that the government is, likely to consider? Because let us not forget that Manipur is a border state.
Well, the operations of border security, counterinsurgency are very clearly demarcated between various agencies functionally. So there is no confusion that if you dedicate security forces or extra reserve forces into maintaining law and order situation, as the case is currently, then you forget about the border. It doesn't work that way. There are security forces dedicated to border security which will continue their work and are doing their work pretty well. So I don't see that being a larger sort of a different plan from what the status quo was. However, based on the request of the state government, there have been several columns of Rapid Action Force, CRPF, etc., which has been deployed in the state to basically augment the capacity of the state police and ensure that there is faster pace to recovery and taking the state on a peace course.
How do you respond to the plan of action that the Home Minister has put out? Do you think that this is going to help in the long run, or do you think this is just a short-term solution?
Well, I think he made certain very interesting points and important points. First of all, we need to keep in mind that he made it a point that he visits. He first of all meets the civil society members of the Kuki community as well as the Meitei community. He ensured that he goes and checks out, all the places wherein refugees who have been moved from their villages are taking shelter in. All those shelter areas have been visited by him. He has ensured all the critical conflict districts are being visited. He ensured that he himself goes and speaks to the victims' families, as well as those who have been displaced. So he has done his groundwork, and then based on his groundwork of 4 days, that he sat there and spoke to not just the state administration, but also the security forces which are there and all the civil societies, he came to a conclusion that for any peace going forward, all the arms have to be, put aside. There should be no insurgent carrying arms and trying to threaten the peace process. That's of paramount importance, be it the Kuki insurgency group or be it any Meitei who has taken up arms, snatched the arms from the police. So he's been equally saying that you need to lay down the arms if you are interested in the peace process. And I think, and I believe what I'm hearing from the ground is that both the Kuki civil society, along with the Sioux groups, have assured the Honorable Home Minister that there will be no violence from their side. And similarly, the promises have been made even from the Meitei Village Defense Forces. So the promises have been made, and we'll have to ensure that at least for 15 days, you allow the investigative agencies to come down to the state and really analyze sequence by sequence what went wrong, who triggered the whole thing. You need to pinpoint that blame. And I believe that, there are representatives of Meitei and the Kuki community on your show also, and a lot of people viewing it. They should stand by the investigations of the CBI. They should not start questioning, because one or the other community would be found responsible for instigating this entire thing. So once that blame is pinpointedly, fixed on somebody, it would be the responsibility of that respective community to own up that process, to ensure that these anti-social elements are identified and handed over to the police administration. This much promise the communities will have to make. Only then there will be a roadmap or a build-up for peace and trust in the society. Otherwise, we will have to go back to, blame game, as what I'm hearing. I am very sorry to say that Professor Swam is not looking forward. He's just going back 70 years back, ever since starting out. I mean, look at the past 5 years. There has been significant stride to take governance to the hills, take governance to the tribal communities of the state, which were hitherto forgotten. Now, you can't start blaming 70-year-old issues and bring them down to the current challenges. With that, no communication can happen. No dialogue can happen that way. So I think we'll have to be careful to narrow down the scope, identify the people who've been instigating the communities, and let the law take its own course. That's possibly the only common ground between two communities. Otherwise, it would be very hard to find, that common ground.
Okay, Professor Swan, you want to respond? Professor Swan, you want to respond?
Vineet, I say, I wish that, the kind of anodyne prognosis that Razat flares out before he walks in the state. Now, I think one fundamental thing that has to be admitted is that from the very outset, this is a clear case of institutionalized riot system, and that constant remain with more offensive and venality. And please check the records there, as well as the ground reports coming from all sides. On the night, intervening night, when the Chief of Army Staff visited Manipur, and on the night in which the Ministry of Homes Affairs Minister of State Nityanand Rai visited, and now the Home Minister, you have offensive strike happening in broad daylight, which was frontally led by police commandos with the backup of these armed ragtag mobs. And I think this is precisely why I find it, bizarre why the Home Minister, who should have been reported much earlier before he visited the state with all the intelligence input, should have taken full appraisal of the complicity of the state government in perpetuating this genocidal attack. It's not just ethnic cleansing, it's genocide in its intent. And you could see how genocidal intent this is, which is far deeper if you look at, for example, the digital, cleansing that happens in Wikipedia site, for example, where there are concerted attempts over time, especially in the last 10 years or so, where some of the historiography or historical records of some of these tribes are sought to be embedded in Meitei characters by one, hackers called Hauremba, which, a friend of mine, S. Tonsing, has pointed out. You have a look at the Quint article. These are evidence, they're glaring evidence and pattern. And why is it that 22 high-ranking army officers are posted in strategic location as you go from Churachandpur down to Imphal and up to Kangpok, Pio Cycle, or to Tengnopal and Chande? Why is it that still today, given the communalized nature and the reported incidents in which some of these high-ranking officers are seen to have actively or directly involved in offensive strike, using mortars, using rocket launcher, using, these illuminating, guns to fire villages? I fail to understand why is it that Armed Forces Special Powers Act, for example, not being imposed in the valley areas? And why is it President's rule not imposed? Why is it the, Home Minister still trusting the state government? Because there is a total collapse of law and order. And until and unless this is accepted, and President's rule immediately imposed, the Chief Minister dismissed, and law and order instituted for some time, I do not see any semblance of peace. Let us address the immediate as well as the long term, because after all, what we see now is not just that happens, sporadically out of a sudden. It has been brewing up for a very long period of time. In fact, over 20 years of my extensive research on Manipur and conflict in Northeast India, I have so many evidence, to show that all these conflicts, whether it is in Manipur, in Assam, or name it, are in effect clear outcomes of democracy deficits, where minority tribal groups or other communities are not given.
What do you mean by democracy, Professor Swan? Can you please
constitutionally mandated by
Professor Swan, can you elucidate and elaborate what do you mean by a democracy deficit?
Yeah, look at, for example, the case of Manipur. If you look at, one important constitutional arrangement in the Article 371 is Article 371C, which in effect mandate the constitution of a Hill Areas Committee, right? Which in effect is considered to be the apex sub-state constitutional arrangement where all scheduled matters, quote unquote, pertaining to the Hill areas are supposed to be vetted. Only then the matter can only be decided and taken up and passed by this assembly. There has been routine, sidestepping of Hill Areas Committee. And in that sense, that's one pointer to democracy deficit. Another thing is, in terms of the district council administration in the Hill areas, which has again been in place as a part of sub-state constitutional asymmetrical arrangement, in effect, they are powerless. And given the number of powers initially given 17, increased subsequently to 2000 to 26, and now, sought to be further increased, in none of these, trajectories, there is enough devolution of, look at the first generation of district council, which was operationalized from 1973 to 1989. You have hardly 17 of the 26
Mr. Rajat
subjects,
Sethi, you have a point. One second. Mr. Rajat Sethi has a point. Mr. Sethi, you want to come in now?
See, I mean, today the Honorable Home Minister made a statement in the press conference. Please allow the investigation processes to unfold. Here, professor is sitting with his set of assumptions, which are 180-degree opposite to the other side's assumptions. How will you march forward? If see you are comfortably sitting out in your offices out of the conflict areas in Manipur, but your brethren are suffering, you cannot have a discussion and a forward looking approach with this attitude. So my simple point is that allow the investigations to complete. 15 days time has been sought by the Home Minister. Allow neutral, either you don't trust the Indian system at all, then that's a separate matter. Okay, then that will have its own serious repercussions. But if you trust the due processes of law in this country, then you have to abide by those. You have to abide by the CBI's investigation, which is going to threadbare, go into the details, establish the facts, ensure the roadmap forward, and then find a negotiation ground. Right now, there is no negotiation ground also on the points that he's trying to raise. Where will you go and talk about the Hill Area Committee when you do not have a common sort of an approach to go and reach out to the Meitei community? You don't have it right now. And if a formula is being devised by the Home Minister, you don't want to trust that as well, then what do you want to do? Then, I can also make a statement that all your wishes, if the wishes were horses, then beggars would ride. It doesn't work like that. We will have to put aside, there are grievances on both the sides. There is no doubt about it.
Okay.
There are long pending grievances. Those grievances have to be addressed systematically. That's a limited point. Now, how do you do that? In order to do that, you'll at least have to go explore ways of creating a common ground. And that is what
Mr. Sethi, I agree.
Can I come back again? Can I come back?
One second. No, I have to get Professor Amar into it. Professor Amar, I want you to respond to what Mr. Sethi said as well as what Suwan said. Shouldn't there be a moderate way of putting this together and solving this in the long run? There are sensitivities involved on both the sides here. The government has to walk a very treacherous path here.
See, we can talk about institutional rioting system because there are things looking like that in the recent crisis. But let's not try to project Manipur has been having institutional rioting system against the minorities. No, I don't think Meiteis have got that kind of majoritarian attitude on how to exploit minorities, and I don't think. And institutional, when the Naga-Kuki conflict happened, it was Meitei Chief Minister Ibobi. He resolved that crisis very shortly. There was no long-term. Within days, everything was resolved, brought to a peaceful situation. So, I would not call it, but the recent Meitei Kuki, something which looks like, two organizations have been mentioned by Timothy. That is very, very unfortunate. And in this forum also, I have said that, the last 4 or 5 months before the recent May 3 crisis, the kind of language which were going on between different groups, Kuki statements and Meitei group statements, which were visible in the social media also, were so bad. And those days I kept asking, and I kept asking my friends in the government, what is this? It's the moment governance comes in. These things should not be allowed to continue for long. Then all of a sudden, May 3 came up. So it's not a majoritarian kind of thing. The institutionalized thing may be a little relationship governance. We really need to question the character of governance in the recent crisis, but it's not a long-term character of governance. And it's not a majoritarian, it's not a Meitei attitude also. At the same time, simultaneously, we need to be very clear, border thing and all those things have been mentioned. Home Minister has talked of border fencing. 80 kilometers very soon, he's thinking of completing border fencing, things like that. We really need, it's not a moment of blaming one against the other or things like that. It's a moment how to evolve policy. We still don't have any policy. We don't have a border policy. We don't have immigration policy. We have no policy working. We don't have a development policy. And we don't know, we don't have any policy. What is happening is that even among the tribals, what is happening is that higher echelons of tribal community, they have been enjoying the benefits more than, in the recent thing also, for going to the airport health control service, that report came out first, other than the, ration items and food items being made available and things like that. So what is much more important is, can we think of a policy whereby all the implementations are done through the framework of that policy, and we can easily make out where something goes wrong, and
All right,
there's
sir.
no alternative. We need
All right,
policy.
sir, we've run out of time. A number of good opinions and suggestions have been given on this show. Unfortunately, consensus is always, miles away in a sensitive matter like this in Manipur. But we definitely hope that the plan that the Home Minister has laid out is going to knock some sort of a semblance into this maddening violence that we have seen in the last few days.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.